Welcome back to One Eye News, America's Eye, laser focus on the truth. Thank you for tuning back in for the conclusion of our debut episode, spotlighting the number one threat to America, which is the anti-American citizens movement. I'm Johnny D, keeping my eye on the truth for America. Okay, folks, we were forced to take a break while I had surgery, but we're back now and ready to arm America with the truth. Our initial intention was to upload the entire first episode that really looks now to be an 8-part series, as we are compelled to include the new material that is happening in real time. So we really can't refer to this as an episode at this point. Rather, we need to call it an 8-part series that spotlights the number one threat to America. And all my predictions will be post-dictions if we continue to delay the conclusion. So we need to get this information out to you guys immediately. So to clarify, we are recording the conclusion of this 8-part series on August 17th, 2017. Okay, let's pick right back up where we left off, and then we will address Charlottesville and the current events of the day. Where we left off was with, a somewhat offensive term and an insulting term, but it is reality, and we must not sugarcoat, folks. And I only mention the term white trash as there are and have been some areas in this country where the police will target white folks if you live in certain neighborhoods. Okay? There are some police that refer to some whites as white trash. And they do target these particular citizens at times. So, there are cops and lawyers and judges and councilmen and women and mayors and governors and congressional members and senators. And yes, folks, even presidents like Obama that abuse their powers to attack, marginalize, persecute, abuse, destroy, and falsely accuse, and then take action against said threat. So yes, there are a small percentage of cops that are on edge and may be trigger happy. And I think we can all agree on that. However, there are many, many, many more out of control citizens, and that is due to the policies of a president that has eliminated laws for many citizens that are black, brown, or an illegal immigrant, or a terrorist, or a gang member, or who is an anti-American citizen willing to create chaos in America. Okay? So this is not new. And when you give power to certain personality types, then there will always be power issues, no matter what race they are or what position that they hold. So I would agree that there should be better training for officers. However, if you are a citizen that agitates and incites violence towards police officers and you make aggressive moves, then you may be shot, okay? Even if you are black, white, brown, green, or whatever. Okay, this is common sense again, folks. And again, there should be physical combat tactics employed before pulling any weapons, if possible. But this is not always possible because, there are issues, because some officers will be outmatched, outsized. And even more so if this happens to be a woman officer, and that is just the reality. And I know how that sounds, and this is why many women should not be officers. I'm sorry, folks, but that's just the reality. But, having said that, many women have the strength, and they should be officers as well. So, you see, folks, we must be able to speak reality even if it hurts someone's feelings. So I am not against women being officers, but it is important to face the reality that all women are just not qualified, just as all men are not qualified. And we should not put unqualified persons in these positions. It's just as simple as that. So the race relations and police relations is a complicated issue, but at the same time, it's a simple issue. Okay, if you're a citizen, black, brown, white, green, purple, or whatever, then don't carry a gun on you if you don't have a license, okay? And don't challenge officers and or impose a threatening posture, and you won't be shot, okay? That's common sense again, folks. So don't stick your hand in the meat grinder, right? Okay, so we just had to kind of finish that up, and now I want to segue into Charlottesville, and we really need to take a pause for this cause right now to highlight the most recent incident of racial and social division that took place in Charlottesville, Virginia. Okay, there have been many on the left insisting that it was white supremacy hate groups that are guilty of domestic terrorism. It is true that the KKK and David Duke were present for this protest. That has been scheduled for several months. It is also true that the Antifa showed up to incite violence along with the Black Lives Matter and to provoke the white supremacists to react in violence. Okay? So this is exactly what took place here. It was the Antifa and Black Lives Matter that showed up to incite the violence. And the KKK and the neo-Nazis took the bait. I mean, these aren't geniuses, so let's recognize that. But even Fox News did not get this part right yet. Everyone is saying that the white supremacists are the ones that incited the violence, but that description do not match the facts. Yes, they are repugnant and disgusting, but they were not the instigators. I think what everybody is trying to say is just because they were holding the rally, that was instigating the violence. But having said that, they were still more than ready to rumble. Okay, let's not lose sight of that fact. They were ready for a fight, and they probably anticipated it. But the fact is clear that this event spotlighted both sides of the problem here in America. It showed the anti-American Antifa, who silences anyone they disagree with, and it showed that Black Lives Matter is all about inciting violence if you disagree with them. It also showed the hate that also fuels the KKK and the neo-Nazis that also do spread their hate as well. But this time, they were in legal standing and within their right to protest the removal of their history, I guess, and the removal of their ancestral history from America. So, listen, folks, this is the history of the country, and no matter whether you agree or we like it or not, this is part of our history. And it is America's history, and these people, no matter how repulsive they are, they do have the right to try to preserve their history. And that is why America is one of the greatest countries and is the greatest country in the world, because we are not like the leftist countries that tear down and remove historical monuments in the name of social justice. Next they will want to destroy Mount Rushmore. Okay? I mean, where does it end, folks? This is what happens in other parts of the world, not in America. And I am not defending either side here. But I think it's important to recognize that it was the Antifa and Black Lives Matter that showed up to incite the riot, and it worked. Okay? There's a lot of suggestion that this was a coordinated domestic terrorist attack, which the left is jumping to conclusions again and prosecuting the case and convicting the suspect without due process that America affords all suspects, right? I mean, even Nazis and OJ. So, anyway, again, I am not defending this individual that may have acted alone and in ignorance and in haste after their protest was attacked. and it turned violent. We just don't know yet. We don't know if this guy was drunk or high, or if he was just trying to make a name for himself within his fellow racists. Okay? The point is that we don't yet know if this was one guy that blew his top and carried out this heinous act of violence, or if they planned it, which to me seems to be unlikely, as this was poorly planned, if it was planned. First of all, whose car was it? Did they steal the car? Or did they just remove their own license plates? Seems to me, if this were to be a planned attack, then they would have stolen a car, and then they would have had an exit strategy plan to ensure a getaway. And it looked to me like a dumbass kid who thought he might make his bones by crashing his car into traffic. I don't know yet, but that's what the video shows. He drove into the vehicle in front of him, and that's when I believe the people were struck by those other cars, possibly by his car as well. But it looks like he drove into the traffic. But the fact is, we cannot condemn one side for their hateful actions without condemning the other side as well, for their attendance and provoking of a riot and for their hateful actions. And it seems that the anti-American Antifa and Black Lives Matter were the groups that showed up to incite and provoke the violence, which may have led to this kid blowing his top and acting on his hate. Okay? Maybe he took a beating earlier in the day and he was getting back at them for kicking his ass. Who knows? Again, we don't know yet. But the fact remains that this was a protest that was on the books. And I'm pointing this out for a reason, folks. And then the left made the plans to disrupt this protest with violence. Okay? And that is a fact. And that is what led to the death of an innocent woman. And so they are both to blame. Not just one side. They are both to blame. And they are all anti-American citizens. So let's make that clear. Okay? And they should all be denounced. Not just one. All. These groups are a snapshot of all the anti-American hate groups operating in America today. On both sides. The Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And the KKK and the neo-Nazis. Okay, which all four of them are democratic leftist organizations, I might add. Okay? So, let's not lose sight of that fact, folks. Nazis are born out of a leftist ideology. And the KKK was founded by the Democrats. And the Democratic Party is the party of slavery and segregation. So let's not, let's not bury our heads on that, folks. And let's recognize that they are all leftist in their origins. And I think that's important. The events that took place in Charlottesville, and then again a few days later in Durham, North Carolina, are a snapshot of what is to come. I have been predicting this for years. And now I am watching it live on my TV. Okay? We here at One Eye News are going to take this opportunity to point this out once again. That these events are the beginning of the next big leftist movement. My predictions for America are not positive and or advantageous for regular American citizens just trying to raise their families and trying to put food on the table and gas in the tank. Okay? Excuse me. There is a storm a-brewing, and it is driven by hate and carried out by a misguided mob of anti-American citizens. Okay, what we are now seeing is how the leftist movements begin. First, they tear down statues and eliminate free speech to silence the opposition. Once they have bullied the majority into joining them, then they kill the rest of the opposition in the name of their social justice. Okay? This scenario has played out time and time again, just like we pointed out, just like One Eye News pointed out, with the 70 million people who were murdered in the name of the leftist socialist movements. Not to mention the 50 million murdered by the Nazis. Okay? That's 120 million folks murdered. This is what is coming to America, folks, and it is already here and being pushed by our former president and the entire Democratic Party, and being backed up and pushed by the entire corrupt mainstream media, mainstream propaganda media, I might say. There has been a pattern and a prime directive that seems to be prevalent here. And that is, when these events are scheduled and the politicians know that they will, these politicians are aware that these events will break out in violence and mayhem. They know this, okay? And the directive is ordered from within the state where the event is happening. In this case, it was Terry McAuliffe, who is the governor, and it would appear that he ordered the mayor to stand down. Or the mayor just ordered the cops to stand down all by himself, which seems highly unlikely. And I watched Terry McAuliffe, and I heard him try to sell the weak story that the white hate groups hid weapons all over town. I read his body language, and I immediately knew he was full of shit. And then and then he went on to engage in this political theater with his fake moral outrage. Okay, his story does not pass the smell test, folks, and he is a snake, as we already know. I am going to call out Terry McAuliffe, and I'm going to call out the mayor of Charlottesville. We believe that you both knew what was going to take place. Okay? And again, the story stinks. Okay, you're the governor. How do you know that these white supremacists were running around town hiding weapons? And if you did know that, Mr. McAuliffe, then why was there not precautions taken? Okay? So again, your story is so full of holes, it's holier than Swiss cheese. Come on. Maybe you did not know someone would die, but you could always hope. Okay? That's what you guys probably hope for. You see, folks, if there happened to be a fatality that could be blamed on the white supremacists, then they could do exactly what you are seeing now. And that is to crucify President Trump no matter what he says. Okay? So they are the vampires using this innocent death, this death of an innocent woman. And this is a person that they are charged to protect. They are charged with the protection of this woman. This is what their job is. And they failed to protect her in order to advance their political agenda and to further their own personal agendas as well. Okay? Now, I know how that sounds, folks, but I want you to look into it for yourselves. And I'm not saying that, look, these people like Terry McAuliffe, again, they're snakes, they're vampires. They are lying, cheating, and they're not going to tell you the truth. They never will, because that's, how they've been trained. So, the fact is that these politicians themselves set up this rumble by restraining the law enforcers from enforcing the law. And so, they were absent. The law enforcement was absent, as the ACLU confirmed. Okay? So if you don't take my word for that, take the ACLU's word for that. Okay? And, it worked out beautifully for the left, because now they can point all their guns at the president and try to kill him in the political arena. Okay? What's that old saying? Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? But this is a pattern. And the Democrats are always the ones in charge of these states and these cities that seem to have all these violent events taking place. So, that really does establish the pattern of the Democratic leaders ordering the cops to stand down. And even if the event erupts in violence, which it always does. We saw it in Ferguson, and every event in every state and or city ran by a Democrat each time, like all of the college events that promote hate against speakers on the right and hate towards whites, and in the name of social justice, like at Berkeley and the rest of the colleges, like at Evergreen, just to name a few, for instance, a few of the many, I might add. Okay, now I was observing very closely to Charlottesville, and I noticed, the first thing I noticed, that there was no police presence during the fight and or riot. And that was by design, folks. This is done each time in the hopes that the left can point their fingers at the right and say, see, they are the Nazis, they are the violent ones, or whatever the event may be. Okay? And the Nazis and these neo-Nazis and these KKK people, they don't show up to all these events, but the other side does. So let's not lose sight of that. And I also noticed that the left were the ones that had no permit. Therefore, they really had no right to attend. So they should not have attended. And it was the left that were the instigators of the violence, which eventually led to the death of one of their own. This is really what the left was hoping for, so they could use anything they could to point to the legal protesters and say, they are the guilty party here. They are the Nazis. They are evil. Hey, we don't need you to tell us that. We all know Nazis are evil. Okay, but we also know you are too. And that is what the president pointed out that nobody likes. And we don't need you showing up to anywhere. Okay, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, we don't need you showing up to anywhere. We don't want you fighting our battles. You do not represent us. We don't want you showing up to any of these events and inciting violence. So go back to your mommy's basement. Let's remember, there were no Nazis or KKK at any of these other violent protests where people were beaten and silenced by the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter. So just because you showed up to create chaos where the Nazis and KKK were protesting, this does not make you heroes. Okay? In fact, it makes you zeros. Okay? There's an old playbook in politics, and that promotes a crisis. And that's what you're all doing. Politicians and the media usually never let a crisis pass by without cashing in on it for their own gain, whether that be ratings or votes or whatever. It is all part of their game. And if a few have to die here and there to serve their greater good, then so be it. And that's how they operate. Collateral damage is always acceptable for the left, as you see in Benghazi and many, many, many other instances as well. Like all the pilots that keep dying from defective equipment that Obama failed to pay for. Okay, let's get back on track. And make no mistake, folks, they are Nazis. But so are the ones that are pointing their finger. They are just a different kind of Nazis. And again, I do not defend Nazis. And as we discussed earlier, that my people were killed by the Nazis. So I don't want Nazis in America or anywhere around me. And these fools are just ignorant idiots that have been taught to hate from the jump, like I discussed earlier. And that will never change until we change it and show them the light. One Eye News can show them the light. So listen up, Nazis. Learn your history and get a life. Okay? Again, they are all anti-American citizens. And they should all be denounced, including the Nazis, the KKK, and Black Lives Matter, and the Antifa, because they are all domestic terrorists. Not just one, all. Just like our former president, Barack Obama, who should also be denounced as just that, for his treacherous, traitorous, treasonous actions against America and the American people. Okay? Finally, it was Terry McAuliffe and the rest of these so-called officials and so-called politicians that ordered the police to stand down and watch the violence and the law breaking in hopes that it would lead to a good political talking point for them. And then, after they allowed the death of an innocent woman, they all came out on TV with their fake moral outrage. Okay? I mean, come on. Come on, folks. And that is all just really just political theater. Because if they would have done their job, then there would have been minimal violence and 0 fatalities. Period. That's it. These so-called officials are to blame. And that is a fact. Yes, of course the Nazi killer is ultimately to blame for the death of this woman. But this never would have escalated if the officials allowed and or ordered the police to police the event, okay? So, I see exactly what is happening here and why it happened. And it never needed to happen. And it would not have happened if Terry McAuliffe, the weak governor, and the rest of these idiots would have taken the necessary precautions. And if they would have simply done their jobs to protect the citizens. They failed, and they should all be removed immediately. Okay? This was not a mistake, my friends. The cops were ordered to let it happen. So they really didn't fail. They actually succeeded in their agenda. This was what they had hoped for. Okay? This was a scheduled protest that was on the books for weeks. And this gave the leftists the time to coordinate their attack and to plan everything out. And when I say the left, this also includes these weak politicians like Terry McAuliffe, who are on the left. And they are also complicit in allowing the leftist hate groups to infiltrate this event and to plan a counterattack. Okay? And all in order to create chaos and a good talking point for the left. Come on, folks, I know you can see this. It's right there in front of us. All you got to do is look at it. All right? Now, it is possible that these operators allowed these events to transpire in the hopes that it would lead to a prosperous talking point for their war on President Trump. Okay, and that's exactly what happened. And I would never rule anything out, and that is what seems to be the more likely scenario here. So let's examine these events through a lens of logical thinking and common sense. If you look at the reality of the lack of police that are engaged when these events take place, you can simply make a deduction and you will see the pattern that has become the norm and very prevalent whenever it is a Trump event or any event in a blue area or any type of an event that could be considered a conservative speaking engagement, or any type of conservative event. You will notice that these cities are ruled by Democratic leaders that order the police to stand down and let the violence occur. Why, folks? Why do they do that? Okay, this is not a conspiracy theory, as it has happened in Charlottesville and again and again and again. But this is this has been happening since Trump started running for president. Spotlighted by the lawsuit that has been filed against the city of San Jose for failing to protect the citizens when there was a violent protest. Okay? And what happened was the cops were actually ordered by someone to herd the Trump protesters into an area where they were trapped by the mob. And that happened, folks. This is not a conspiracy theory, okay? Which sounds a whole lot like what happened in Charlottesville, when the cops herded the Nazis and the KKK into the end of the park, where they were confronted by the angry Black Lives Matter and Antifa hate groups, okay? So it was hate clashing with hate, and the cops apparently, according to ACLU, kind of directed those protesters to clash with each other. So, again, this is a pattern, and this also happened in Berkeley, where there are standing orders for the police to allow the violence to occur until it becomes fatal. And this is a fact, folks. These are standing orders. This also happened at the University of Washington, and also at Evergreen College, and Middlebury College, and on and on and on. So this is another confirmation of just some of the anti-American activities and the negative effects that One Eye News has been spotlighting and predicting. Okay? I believe that the mother of the incident of the victim that was killed in Charlottesville should file a lawsuit against the state, the so-called Governor Terry McAuliffe, and I know you're not supposed to be able to sue these guys, but they should be able to, and the so-called mayor, and the city of Charlottesville, and the white supremacists, and the black supremacist group Black Lives Matter. Okay? Because they are black supremacists. And the Antifa as well. They should file lawsuits against all of these people. Number one, the state and the city. First and foremost. Because they failed to protect her daughter, which was their job. And they had ample evidence to show that there was going to be violence. Okay? So people, people really need to learn their history, and they need to appreciate America. Okay? All Americans should be proud to be American and have some gratitude for the fact that they are lucky enough to either be born here, or they are lucky enough to have immigrated here and to have the opportunity to be free and to live the American dream. Okay? And I am going to mention this because I thought it was somewhat profound and making a positive out of a negative. And I'm going to mention something that I heard that I thought was, and I'll probably be crucified for mentioning it, but I'm going to mention it anyways, because I was listening to a black speaker that was talking about slavery, and he said he was glad for slavery, and he was thankful for it. Okay, I know this is going to be controversial. But he went on to say, because without slavery, he would be living in Africa, and who in the hell wants to live in Africa? He said. And he was very serious, and I found that to be a fresh perspective. For it was a Republican president of the United States of America and the white citizens of America that ended slavery for America and for the entire world, I might add. And after about 5,000 years of slavery being the norm. Okay? So, America should be recognized as a leader in these regards, not disparaged. Okay, so look, folks, the fact is, before the white citizens of America and a Republican president ended slavery for the entire world, okay, before that, slavery was the norm and had been for thousands and thousands of years. And it was not invented by white American men. So let us recognize these facts. We have all been slaves at some point in our history. Many believe the Jews, maybe the Jews should insist that every Egyptian and that every German pyramid and building should be demolished. Maybe that's what should happen. Maybe the Jews should insist that every Egyptian pyramid and every German building standing today should be demolished. Is that right? Nah, I don't think so. Anyhow, Native Americans had slaves when the whites landed at Plymouth Rock. And so did all the other races around the world. Slaves were of all colors, creeds, and races, not just black. Okay, folks? Let's recognize that, and let's quit making yourselves victims every single day, every single minute, every single second. None of you were owned. None of you were slaves. So stop. Stop living in the past. Let's move forward, not backward. Okay? Again, African kings had slaves and also sold slaves to the whites. And so did every other country and clan in the world at that time. Okay? These are facts that are never mentioned and have become irrelevant to these so-called social justice warriors. It's pretty simple common sense if you ask me. Study history before you go out and burn down the country. Okay? I have only heard a few people telling the truth about what happened here in America, about what is really happening here in America and what happened in Charlottesville. The loudest voice that just told America the truth about what happened in Charlottesville was President Trump. And since Trump again told America the truth about who was to blame, which was both sides, he again was not appreciated. Okay? Instead, then he was crucified and admonished for telling the truth. So both the corrupt media and all of the grandstanding politicians who are greasing their own wheels right now by running down to the cameras to dramatize their own self-proclaimed significance in the political theater and thus joining in with the corrupt media and the rest of the leftist anti-American citizens to call our president a racist and a fascist white supremacist and on and on and on. Okay? So again, I will denote that if this media and these anti-American politicians and these anti-American citizens are allowed and able to attack a sitting president and to label the current president as a racist with zero evidence, well, folks, then we here at One Eye News shall also reserve the right to do the same to the former president. And we will identify the former president as a racist, and with several documented evidentiary documents to back that up that do confirm his racist associations and actions, unlike the accusations against our current president, President Trump, and the confirmations of relationships with other racists, and not to mention Obama just blatantly invited racist groups to the White House. And also, we will point out the former president is also a lifelong anti-American citizen and one of the leaders of the anti-American citizens movement. Okay? So we're going to point that out for you folks, and I assume that I will be crucified by the end of this 8-part series, because I'm going to give you all the information that you need, and it will prove what we're telling you about Obama, and it will also disprove what they are trying to tell you about Trump. Okay? So the reason that Charlottesville is so important right now at this particular time in history is because this event shows the future of what America faces. And this is just the beginning of the next big leftist movement, folks, that has been ongoing for decades, but is now showing itself due to the election of an outsider that poses the most significant threat to their corrupt systems that the lifelong politicians and bureaucrats have installed and kept in place in order to keep the people ignorant and uninformed, and to keep the public in the dark while they rape and pillage our country and its resources. Okay, and I'm going to point out one way they've done that. Like, for instance, the Nestle Corporation that has been sucking all the fresh water from the Great Lakes and those surrounding areas. Okay? This is something that most people don't know about, and One Eye News is going to tell you about it real quick, and then we're going to, do future episodes on these kind of issues. Okay, the Nestle Corporation, and they've been sucking all the fresh water out, okay? And the people of Flint, Michigan wonder why they are dying and getting sick from contaminated water. This is why, folks. The Nestle Corporation made $1.8 billion in just one fiscal year by extracting the fresh water from the Great Lakes areas and then bottling it and then sending it to China for record profits. And this is just 1 year from one company, and that is a microcosm of the selling out of America during the Obama years, and that is why Flint has shit toilet water. Thanks, Obama. Okay? That's why, folks. The people of Flint, Michigan should be suing the Nestle Corporation. And I would wager that the people of Flint, Michigan have no idea about any of this stuff. They should be suing the Nestle Corporation and Obama. And I know they can't sue Obama, but they should be able to. And if they can't sue him, they should send him daily correspondence, detailing the death and sickness of all of these citizens that has been allowed to transpire under Obama and because of his policies. Okay, let's get back on track, folks. We have to get through this information because there's just so much of it, but let's get back on track. So the fact is, folks, each generation since this movement has begun have been indoctrinated at a faster pace and with more damaging rhetoric that teaches the youth to hate their own country, and that their leaders and their founders were all racist, rich, white men that should be overthrown and or should be removed from power and or from history. The ultimate objective of these leftists are to destroy the United States of America because they believe that this country is racist and was founded by old white racist slave owners. And that is unacceptable to these anti-American terrorists. Okay? Once again, go back and look at your history, folks. All you uninformed anti-American citizens need to study. Go back and study. Okay, and speaking of studies, there was a study recently polled many on the left, and the results of this study showed that these participants believed that America's founding documents were racist. And the authors of these documents were also racist. And therefore, they believe that all of America's founding documents should be destroyed. Again, my friends, this is how it all begins. First they tear down the statues. Then they silence the opposition by intimidation and violence. Then they remove history from our educational systems. Then they attack our republic and our democracy. Then they circumvent and destroy laws of the land. Then they beat up citizens. Then they burn down and destroy founding documents. Then they offer the choice to join or die. Then they kill anyone that opposes their new world order. And this is all done in the name of social justice, my friends. And these fanatics have been brainwashed to believe that whites and cops are their enemies that stand in the way of their righteous social dream. What they do is they scream that their opponents and their opposition is racist, and therefore they're on the right when they attack citizens with violence, and therefore it is violence that is acceptable because they are ridding the world of hate. Okay? This is what they have been taught, and this is what they actually believe. Okay? When they attack citizens with violence, they believe that it is acceptable. And that is exactly how the event in Charlottesville has been framed by both Republicans and Democrats, I might add, that are trying to eliminate the president from office so they can resume their anti-American fleecing of America without delay and or challenge. They all have a common enemy, and he is the duly democratically elected President of the United States of America. They must push the masses to believe that this was a one-sided hateful protest by deplorable Nazis and KKKs. Okay? This is not entirely true, my friends. The president was right when he said there were two sides, and that is a fact. And now he is the story. The president is the story. It is not the violence or the death of this innocent woman or even the killer. The story now has been buried, and now the story has become the racist, white supremacist president. That is the story being pushed. And the truth has been lost in the media mayhem that is attacking the president as if he himself was behind the wheel of the car. Okay? Unfortunately, the only citizens, I mean, this is really sad, folks. Yeah, but I have to point it out. It's really sad and disgusting. But unfortunately, it appears that the only citizens and or groups that have recognized just what is transpiring in America are the hate groups on the right, I guess. I don't know. So at this particular time, it seems that the KKK and the neo-Nazis they seem to have recognized what is taking place here. Now again, I am not advocating for these groups, but I am pointing out that it's pretty frickin' bad when the KKK and the Nazis are the only American citizens fighting to stop the leftist movements that promise to rewrite the Declaration of Independence and or to burn it up. Okay? Again, I do not want any Nazis of any sort in America and or any groups like the KKK or the Black Lives Matter or the Antifa. They're all disgusting. And they are all ignorant to the fact that we all bleed the same red blood and that we are all connected and that we are all related, whether they like it or not. So yeah, Nazis, you're related to Jews. Yeah, get used to it. White supremacists, you're related to blacks. Black supremacists, you're related to whites. Get used to it. That's the fact. We are all brothers and sisters and cousins, and so we are all connected throughout the history of time. And this should be more important than the color of one's skin, folks. So, the rest of America needs to wake up to what One Eye News is presenting. Because this is the truth about the state of our union. And if we fail to act now, it will be too late and we will have an insurrection from within our own citizens. And America will cease to exist. Okay? So, it's really getting pretty bad, folks. And that's why I could not wait any longer to get this next hour up. And I may have to take a break here soon just so I can, like I said, I did have to do some surgery. And in an earlier segment, I indicated that I was blessed with time necessary to decipher all of these lies that the media tries to sell. Well, in reality, sometimes a blessing may be a curse, or a curse could be a blessing. Either way, I'm taking the time, and we here at One Eye News have spent decades, and that is not an exaggeration, decades, uncovering a lot of this information. So hopefully we can get this out here to the people. And again, we know that none of this will be heard until we actually promote this channel, which we intend to do once this first 8-hour episode or series is actually uploaded. Then we will begin the actual promotion of the station and get this out to the public. But we have to get this documented so my predictions are not postdictions. So fact, one last very significant point that should not be disregarded. Greg Jarrett of Fox News and an attorney, I don't know, maybe he's one of the good ones. I don't know. I think he is. Again, there are some good attorneys, you know. Let's not, you know, denounce all of them. But there is about 80% of them in America that are slimeballs. Anyway, Greg Jarrett, a good attorney, he presented a report that indicated that over the last 30 years, and he did a lot of research on this, over the past 30 years, no president, 0 presidents, have ever come out to denounce or disavowed or condemned any of these Nazi or KKK events or groups at all, period. Not one president. So to reiterate, President Trump is the only president in the last 30 years that has come out to denounce these hate groups in any documented event that involved the KKK or the neo-Nazis that has ended up in violence. Okay? So, Obama never did that. Hello? So, Mr. Jarrett also confirmed what we had already believed to be fact, as we were reporting what other organizations like the ACLU had already reported. And that was that it was 2 sides with weapons. And the ACLU reported that they did not know who threw the first punch, and they were standing on ground with boots on the ground right there in front of the entire event. Okay, but Jarrett reported that there was warnings that led up to this event, and that there was a judge who refused to move the event even though they had reports of this potential violence. Okay? Now let's examine that, folks. There was a judge that refused to move the event. Why? Why did that judge do that, folks? I would suggest that judge did that because that was all part of the plan. Okay? And then they just kept the event in that town. And then they ordered the police to stand down. Why, folks? Why did they do that? Okay? You should be asking that question. There is a reason. Again, they presented evidence that some of the protesters would be armed and that bloodshed would occur. This was the language used. The protesters would be armed and that bloodshed would occur. This judge, who is Judge Glenn Conrad, a real coward if you ask me, a so-called federal judge, and a so-called judge, to use President Trump's terms, this is not a judge. This is a person masquerading as a judge. Why is he allowed to be a judge? Okay, I could do a much better job and so could you. Okay, so anyways, Judge Glenn Conrad, a federal judge, refused the evidence and called it speculative and refused to move the event. Why, folks? Why did he refuse? So, if this so-called judge would have taken this threat seriously, and this so-called Governor Terry McAuliffe would have done his job to protect the citizens, then Heather Heyer would still be alive today. That is a fact. Alright? So Terry McAuliffe, you're a weak, ineffective, immoral piece of garbage who should resign immediately. I know you have aspirations of the presidency, and this was all about that. But we're going to expose you for your anti-American actions, Mr. McAuliffe. You let this person die by letting this event transpire the way it did. This never had to happen. But I believe this was a calculated effort by the left to cash in on this crisis, as they knew that this event would result in violence and possibly death. So when I see these clowns like Terry McAuliffe and the rest of these, so-called leaders feigning their moral outrage then I just have to call BS on it because that's what it is. Okay? And we should all be aware of that fact. Please, folks, go back and look at the news footage. Go back and just take a look, slow it down, play it in slow motion, then go back and listen to Terry McAuliffe. Listen to what he says. Watch his body language. He is a lying, sniveling scumbag. And I'm going to own that phrase from here on. I took it from you, Maxine Waters, because you too are a scumbag. Okay? And I know maybe this isn't how news organizations are supposed to present themselves. Well, we're going to be a different kind of news organization. Like I said before, we're not going to speak in Ivy League speech. We are not going to speak in governmental lawyer language. We're going to speak in American basic language, and that is very simple to understand. And we're not going to try to muck it up with a bunch of $10 words like all these lawyers try to do to try to convince you that their somehow moral standing is above those of those they're trying to persecute. Okay? So these people are they're actors, for lack of a better term, and they should all be in Hollywood because they're pretty good actors. Fact. President Trump is the only president in the last 30 years to ever come out and denounce these disgusting citizens that repulse us all. Not Obama, not Bush, not Clinton, none of them. Fact. Not only did the president make it clear that he is against the violence, but he is against all violence from all sides. And that should have been applauded, not disparaged. And that is a fact. Fact. President Trump seems to be the only grown-up willing to face the ugly truth and tell the American citizens the whole truth about this reality. That there were two sides and they were both hate groups. I believe what is happening with the media and the leftists, and now even many on the right, is that they are beginning to let the peer pressure convince them that if Trump does not say exactly what they want him to say, then he and all of his supporters are racist. Okay? I mean, it is straight out of the frickin' Twilight Zone, folks. And this may be starting to work on some that are still really just naive or just not willing to accept reality. Listen, folks. President Trump is making my point for me as well. It is unfortunate that they do not take him seriously because he has apparently noticed exactly what we are describing to America. The president has noticed this. And we have been talking about, this is what we've been talking about right here at One Eye News. And this is one of the only people who have noticed what we are talking about. He hasn't heard what we're saying, but he noticed this because he's observant, unlike the media. Okay? He's doing the media's job. And that is, he noticed what we see. And that is that the president is seeing reality of the anti-American citizens movement. And he recognizes exactly what we do. And that is the fact that there are a very minimal number of these KKK and neo-Nazis. However, there are many, many more of these anti-American leftist agitators, instigators, and violent protesters that have been running around the country, silencing speakers and burning down cities without consequences. So, hey, maybe the president realizes that this is a real threat to America. And now he's trying to warn us. Come on, folks. It's pretty simple to see. He tried to warn us. Look, there's hate there, but there's also hate here. You cannot bury your heads in the sand to the hate over on this side. The president is trying to tell America the truth about the real threat, and that real threat has big, big, big physical numbers and big, big money behind their violence. Because he has seen them. He's seeing them show up all around the country, burning down cities since his election. And he has not seen any of these white supremacists burning down cities. So common sense again, folks. Again, I mentioned that Trump was akin to Rodney Dangerfield's character in Caddyshack. And what was Rodney Dangerfield's famous line? I get no respect. No respect, folks. So again, Trump will never have their respect because he ain't one of them, which means he ain't corrupt. Okay, folks? So we're going to cut this off and we're going to pick this back up for the final hour. I hope. I'm pretty sure we should be able to get through with the final hour, but we had to include this, and we still have a little bit to denote and to clarify before we complete this section or this segment with this particular information. But for now, we're going to move on and we're going to cut off this segment here. And thank you again for tuning in to One Eye News, America's Eye, laser focus on the truth. I'm Johnny D, keeping my eye on the truth for America. Okay, folks, we'll catch you on the flip side. Thank you.